We're here in the rather plush Radisson just across the way from Gamescom proper to discuss one of the surprise reveals of Sony's conference the other day. What was it?
The Tomorrow Children.
Okay, this was a bit of a mystery before. It's still a mystery now. What is Tomorrow's Children?
It's kind of a futuristic social experiment kind of game. It's an asynchronous and synchronous networked game. And it involves you trying to restore mankind to its former glory. It kind of takes a sort of 1960s kind of like a Cold War sort of rhetoric, and it's kind of we've twisted it and pushed it forward about 90 years and made it a little bit sort of like a reinvented future.
So what was the origins of the project? How did this come about? How did the idea flourish?
It really came about because I have an interest in that kind of period from my childhood, where if you were in Britain in the 70s, there was a lot of TV programs about Cold War, you know, sort of thrillers, and there was the old TV series called The Prisoner, and I've always liked that very stoic kind of design, you know, and fashion, and I wanted to use that in a game somehow, and so that's the starting point, and then we extrapolated from that.
Okay, so for the player, I mean, what are they going to see when they experience the game? How do they experience the game?
Well, you play as a clone of a girl, and you basically can do what you want in the game. It's a sandbox, so it's kind of like a very open kind of feeling. But there are rules in place that you can ignore, but you can just kind of enter the world and go and mine resources and bring them back to the town and then defend it against monsters that come and attack the town. And that's kind of the very, very basic loop of the game.
Okay. And with the sort of Cold War style, with almost that parallel then, what are you incorporating into the game from that? Is it just a design aesthetic, or is there more to it?
Well, the whole game is kind of a bit of a Marxism simulator, so a very big parody of a Marxism simulator. So we kind of pull elements from that kind of way of thinking, you know, of like where everybody's working together for a common goal, and you know, you everybody pulls together. So if you go and get resources like that, those are shared with everybody else, and then you can build the town, and you take votes to build what you want to build next and things like that. So it's very much a group thought kind of experience.
First person?
It's third person, camera behind the player. So it's like the controls are kind of like a platforming game, I suppose. You know, sort of a typical 3D sort of platforming game.
And we were talking about resources here. I mean, what are you mining, so to speak?
Well, we use this new technology called layer depth cube, which lets us deform the environment at a polygonal level. So there've been games like, you know, Minecraft that do it on a sort of cube-based level, but we have a system in place where you can basically cut arbitrary shapes outside, out of the landscape, and or add to it and mold it in that kind of way. And so as you mine it out, you really are just shaping it to what you want it to be, and you find resources and things within, like gold and metal and wood and that kind of thing, within the islands, and then you bring them back to the town.
Okay. And does this town start off to begin with very, very basic then? I mean, you're saying about defending it from monsters. Is it even a perimeter wall, anything like that, or is this something you have to make as you go along?
It'll depend, depending on the initial town you join, I suppose. It does start very basic though, so there's just a couple of buildings and you know, a wall, and the basic buildings you need to start building other buildings, basically.
And you sort of said there about the town you would join, it depends on that, so it's just completely randomized environment?
It's actually a sort of persistent environment, so the first town you join is probably the town you're going to be in for a while, and then you stay in there for, you know, as long as you feel like you want to stay in that particular town, if you enjoy the people who are in the, you know, if you enjoy working with the people who are in the town. If you don't, then you can move to another town. So that's also fairly free form.
So when you say about enjoying, or you get on with the people in the town, what sort of inhabitants are you going to come across? Well, that's it. You know, it's the other players. It's the other players in the world. We have 50 to 100 people in one town, and they're all collaborating, or they're not collaborating. So if they're all lazy, then
your town's going to get destroyed, and you're going to be doing all the work to defend it. So I think it becomes a pretty interesting social experiment at that point. How much group responsibility do you have? Because you can just do whatever you want. You could just go wandering around exploring the islands and just making holes and tunnels and building stuff, and just ignore all that side of the game completely.
And with the monsters attacking the town, then is that a continuous cycle, and they will home in on wherever the town is, rather than perhaps chasing players in the existing underground environments?
There's actually a combination. So the big monsters tend to come for the town, or you see them marauding, like walking around, and then eventually they'll come to the town and start attacking the buildings, and they'll destroy the people you've saved as well. That's the other thing. So you've saved people who've been lost in the world, and you bring them back to the town and you restore them to real humans, and then the monsters will come in and actually attack and kind of eat them. So you don't really want that to happen.
You say restoring them. How do you find them then? What do you find out in the world?
They're kind of lost in these kind of Russian dolls, like Matryoshka dolls, and you find them and you have to lug them back to town and put them in a machine, which then the machine restores them to human form, and then they'll live in the town. And once they're living in the town, you've got to make sure there's electricity in the town. You've got to make sure they're fed, and basically keep the town running. So it gets harder and harder in that sense.
And is there any sort of extra dynamic to the inhabitants, these rescued inhabitants wandering the town at all, other than will you see them interacting with each other? How does that process work?
Yeah, so as you increase the population, they actually start to help out a little bit around town. Or they don't. It's up to their personality, I suppose. The human characters are AI characters, so it's up to sort of like how we've designed them. Like, so sometimes some of them will eat a lot, and some of them won't, and some of them will actually help and like start moving stuff around and repairing buildings that have been destroyed and that kind of thing.
And what sort of mechanics, what sort of systems are in place for this interaction with building things within the town?
Okay, so that's a voting system. So we have a lot of sort of voting systems in the game. So every couple of days you vote in a mayor, and the mayor is an AI character who has a certain set of rules that he changes for the whole world. And so, for example, you might vote in a mayor that who his manifesto is to speed up all the vehicles in the game, and so while he's in power, you get that speed up. So and then for the building of other buildings, you have another vote. So when you've collected a certain amount of crystals together, then it will trigger another vote, and then you can decide from a number of buildings which one you want to be built next. And that's how you all have to join together. But the interesting thing about the game is every single little thing you've done in the game, even if you're digging a hole or you're just moving stuff around, is recorded by the state. And every now and then you should go to the labour office, and the labour office will actually give you a report of everything you've done, and then give you a wage based on that. And then you can use that wage to get better tools, or to just buy stuff in the game, or you can use it to even improve your vote, so you can actually boost your vote and make it better than other people's votes, which is quite an interesting dynamic.
So you're not constructing the buildings yourself. You're deciding and choosing from a selection of templates that are then voted on. Yeah. What about the location where these particular buildings, whatever, are actually placed? How does that factor in?
We're still working on a few ideas for that, because obviously it's a group thing, so it's very difficult to find an average for a location. And so at the moment they build out automatically into spaces that are available within the town. But there's another subsection of the game which is crafting, and the crafting, you personally craft stuff with the resources that people have collected, and that gives you certain buildings like turrets and lights and things which you set up wherever you want. And there's the whole thing. You can even create little sapling trees and start growing them around town if you want, and things like that. So it's like a combination between those two. So you have the group decided things like the big buildings, which are the functional buildings. For example, if you wanted a church, for example, then obviously you don't need more than one church. So you all vote and you get a church, and then the church is built in the town. But then for other buildings like turrets and lights and fittings and benches and all kinds of other stuff, you craft those yourself.
So you mentioned turrets there. Is that the only way you can combat and stop the monsters from attacking the town?
No, you can actually there's weapons you can have as well. So that there's like a missile launcher and a shotgun and stuff like that. And there's a couple of other turrets which are coming into play later on as well. And also, depending on if you've built the right buildings, you can actually build tanks as well. And there's also a sort of jet copter, kind of helicopter kind of thing, which you can use to go and attack the monsters. So there's plenty of ways to attack the monsters.
Can you enter the buildings as well?
We haven't put that in there at the moment because we didn't feel it was that necessary. So we concentrated on other stuff.
Okay, so it's not necessarily squirreling away in your own home per se. You're always going to be connected to the town and the outside world.
Yeah, and we are actually looking into having allowing people to purchase their own actual house and things just for the fun of it on the black market. So we have that sort of black market whole section of the game where you can do that kind of thing.
Well, how long's the game been in development, and how long have you? I mean, what have you got next once you come out of this place?
Yeah, we've been working on it for about 3 years. The first we began small and then just slowly grew, and as the ideas formed. And we're not that far from the end. We're looking at a release in 2015, so it's not too far away now.
Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to us.
Thank you very much.